I hate my younger brother. Everyone says he's a golden boy, but to me, he's just a parasite. And because of that, I feel like a monster. I think I might have accidentally ruined my best friend's life, and no one knows. It all started when my friend, let's call him Jake, decided to trust me with something huge. We've known each other since middle school, and everyone always said we were inseparable. I genuinely thought that too, until the summer he dropped the bombshell. He had been secretly applying to this super competitive internship, the kind that could basically define his entire future, and for some reason, he wanted me to look over his personal statement. "You're brutally honest," he said, "so tell me if it sucks." I had no idea how much power those words would give me. Jake has always been the golden kid. Smart, funny, effortlessly charming. He has this aura that makes everyone like him instantly. And then there's me, quiet, awkward, with a messy room and a tendency to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I've spent years watching him glide through life while I stumble over the simplest stuff. So when he handed me that document, I had this tiny, ridiculous human urge to maybe just exaggerate a tiny critique. I read the essay once, then twice. Honestly, it was good. Better than good. It was polished, heartfelt, and he had this way of making the reader care about him instantly. But instead of just pointing out minor tweaks, I started scribbling comments like a ruthless editor on a caffeine binge. "This paragraph is boring, your example is weak, you sound arrogant here." And then, I added a line about how he might come off as insincere because of the way he always tries too hard to please everyone. I convinced myself I was helping him. I even read it back and thought, okay, maybe it's harsh, but it's honest. Maybe a little brutal. He trusted me. He'd asked for honesty. And so, I sent it back with all my red marks, underlining, and exclamation points like a deranged teacher. I imagined him reading it, taking my advice, and improving his essay to the point where it would blow everyone away. Except that didn't happen. When I called him the next day, his voice was strange. Quiet, tight. "Thanks," he said, almost whispering. I laughed nervously, trying to sound normal. "Yeah, no problem. You'll crush it." But he didn't laugh. And then I saw it. The texts. He'd started deleting all our group chat conversations with mutual friends, leaving weird vague messages like, "feeling lost." And the worst part? I didn't notice the pattern right away because I was obsessively proud of how honest I'd been. I convinced myself that the guilt I felt was just me being dramatic. The real nightmare came a week later. Jake's mom accidentally forwarded me an email from the internship board. I clicked it without thinking, and my stomach dropped like a rock. The email said, "We regret to inform you," followed by the usual formal rejection text. But what hit me wasn't just the rejection, it was the line they quoted from his personal statement. One of my brutal comments. He'd included it word for word as part of a reflection section. And not as a reflection on himself improving, but as if he'd agreed with it, like it was true. That one little sentence about being insincere? They literally wrote back that they didn't feel he had the authenticity they were looking for. I sat there for hours, staring at the screen. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to delete the email, to somehow pretend this never happened. But it was too late. I had planted the seed of doubt, and somehow, in a twisted cosmic joke, it grew into the reason he got rejected. I kept replaying the moment I hit send, imagining his face reading all my cruel annotations. Every laugh we'd shared, every dumb joke, it all felt tainted. And here's the part that kills me most. Jake has no idea I'm responsible. He's sad, yeah, but he thinks it was just a fluke, bad luck, or maybe he just didn't connect with the panel. Meanwhile, I'm living in this constant guilt, laughing nervously when someone mentions internships or college apps, pretending I don't know I'm the villain in his story. I wonder every day if I should tell him, or if that would just make it worse. Have you ever said something honest that ended up destroying someone's chances or happiness? Would you confess, or let them stay in the dark? After that email, I couldn't stop thinking about Jake. I replayed the moment over and over again in my head like a broken record, and every replay made me feel worse. I started noticing the little things. How he laughed less loudly, how he paused when talking about the internship, how he avoided the topic entirely. Every time he mentioned college or his future plans, I felt this sharp, twisting guilt in my stomach. I wanted to call him, tell him the truth, but then I imagined the look on his face, the anger, the betrayal, and I froze. Instead, I became this shadow, watching him from a distance, feeling proud of being honest, while secretly knowing I'd sabotaged him. It wasn't just about the internship anymore. It was about every little interaction after that. I started overanalyzing everything I said to him. If I laughed too hard, I worried he would think I was mocking him. If I complimented him, I wondered if he would sense the guilt behind my words. I was constantly on edge, and yet, bizarrely, I couldn't bring myself to stop seeing him. I told myself it was friendship, that I genuinely cared, but deep down, I knew it was guilt driving me. I wanted to watch him succeed, and yet I was the reason he had failed. The contradiction tore me up inside. Then came the awkward moments with our mutual friends. They noticed something was off. "Is Jake okay?" someone asked casually one evening while we were hanging out at a cafe. I shrugged and mumbled something like, "Yeah, he's fine, probably just stressed about applications." But I could see them exchanging glances, sensing the tension. I wanted to tell them what happened, to unload this burden, but every time I tried to form the words, my throat closed up. The fear of judgment, the shame, the embarrassment, it all wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. So I stayed quiet, laughed a little too loudly at jokes, nodded at their questions, and pretended that everything was normal. At night, I would lie awake scrolling through social media. I saw posts from other applicants celebrating acceptances, sharing screenshots of congratulatory emails, and my chest would tighten. I wondered if Jake saw these posts too, and if he compared himself to them, feeling smaller, inadequate, like I had always made him feel in subtle ways without even realizing it. I imagined him reading my comments, believing that the harsh truths I wrote were objective, and my stomach would twist in knots. The guilt became a physical thing, a constant companion whispering reminders that I had ruined something important, maybe irreversibly. The most humiliating moment came a few weeks later at a casual gathering at Jake's house. He was talking about another opportunity that had come up, some small internship that wasn't as prestigious, and he sounded hesitant, nervous. I forced a smile and said, "Hey, that sounds amazing. You'll do great." Inside, I was screaming. Every word felt fake, forced, because I knew my previous honesty had left him second-guessing himself, doubting his worth, questioning everything. And the worst part was seeing him laugh at my jokes, the same easy laughter that used to come naturally, now tinged with uncertainty. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never come back. I tried to distract myself by focusing on my own life, but nothing worked. School, work, family, hobbies, they all became background noise while my brain replayed that red-marked essay over and over. I even started dreaming about it. In the dreams, Jake would confront me, eyes wide and hurt, demanding to know why I had said what I did. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, feeling guilty before my day had even started. I realized I had become obsessed with this one mistake, this one moment that had spiraled into something monstrous. One day, I saw an opportunity to make it up in my mind. Jake mentioned a different application that was coming up, and I thought, maybe if I helped him, I could somehow fix things. I offered to review his draft. My heart pounded as I opened the document. I was hyper-aware of my previous sabotage, and I tried to be gentle, careful, almost painfully polite. I only highlighted obvious typos or structural issues, nothing more. And yet, even this small attempt felt like a performance. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope over a pit of fire, afraid that one wrong word would send everything crashing down. But here's the truth. Even while trying to be careful, I realized I couldn't erase what had already happened. My previous comments had left a mark on Jake that couldn't simply be undone with polite edits. I could guide him, help him avoid mistakes, give advice, but I couldn't fix the self-doubt I had implanted, the tiny seeds of insecurity that had sprouted in the aftermath of my honesty. And so, I started avoiding him more and more, finding excuses not to spend time together, not because I didn't care, but because every interaction reminded me of the guilt gnawing at me. I sometimes catch myself thinking, maybe he'll never know, and maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. He still laughs, still talks about dreams and plans, and maybe life will move on for him. Maybe he'll succeed elsewhere and never realize the role I played in that rejection. But for me, the guilt doesn't fade. It sits quietly in the back of my mind, surfacing at random moments, when I'm alone, when I hear someone talk about their achievements, when I see a post about an acceptance or a scholarship. It's a constant reminder that I was the cause of someone's pain, and that I might never be able to undo it. Sometimes I wonder, if I confessed, would it help? Would it hurt more? Would he forgive me, or would our friendship shatter completely? I don't know. I fear that telling him would make it real, official, undeniable. But keeping it a secret eats at me every day. I feel like I'm living two lives, one where I'm the supportive friend, and another where I'm the architect of his setback, hiding behind a mask of normalcy while the truth festers underneath. And so I carry it silently, hoping he never finds out, hoping life will somehow balance itself out, hoping that one day I can forgive myself. Have you ever made a mistake so big that you couldn't take it back? Would you tell the truth, or let it stay buried forever? A few months after the rejection, life started moving in slow, uneven waves. Jake tried to shake off the disappointment, but I could see the cracks every time we met. He smiled, but there was a hesitance behind it, a subtle self-consciousness that had never been there before. I told myself he was resilient, that people get rejected all the time, that he would bounce back. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a missed opportunity. It was about the shadow I had cast over him, a shadow he didn't know existed. I started avoiding certain conversations, especially anything related to internships, applications, or the future, because every mention stabbed me with guilt. I couldn't watch him wrestle with the consequences of my honesty, and I couldn't face him knowing I was the reason behind it. Then came the day I realized my guilt had started to bleed into my daily interactions with everyone, not just Jake. I became hyper-aware of my words, second-guessing everything I said to friends, family, even strangers. I started apologizing for things that weren't my fault, crafting my words carefully like a bomb disposal expert, because one careless comment could have consequences I didn't want to face. And yet, with Jake, I couldn't stop thinking about that essay, about the rejection email, about the line that had shattered his confidence in ways I could never undo. Every time he laughed, I felt a pang of guilt. Every time he mentioned a goal or dream, I felt a tightness in my chest, a silent reminder of the role I played in making him doubt himself. One evening, I was scrolling through my phone when I stumbled across a social media post about the internship program. Someone had shared their acceptance email, glowing and enthusiastic, celebrating their success. I stared at the post for what felt like hours, imagining Jake in that position, imagining the email he would have gotten if I had only been less honest. The thought was unbearable. I felt a mix of shame, jealousy, and guilt twisting in my stomach. I wanted to reach out to him, to apologize, to explain, but the words felt like they would crush him rather than help. So I stayed silent. Then the nightmares started. I'd wake up in cold sweats, heart racing, imagining Jake confronting me. He would be angry, hurt, betrayed, and I would be powerless, unable to explain that I thought I was helping, that I never meant to sabotage him. In the dream, his eyes would bore into mine, searching for some truth, and I would wake up feeling smaller than ever, the weight of my mistake pressing down on my chest. Even waking life didn't feel safe. I would replay conversations in my head, thinking about what I said, what I didn't say, what I could have done differently. Every minor decision I made after that essay felt loaded with potential consequences, and I became obsessed with controlling every outcome, even when it was impossible. It was during one of these obsessive spirals that I started noticing changes in Jake that I hadn't paid attention to before. He started withdrawing from our friends, canceling plans at the last minute, and making vague references to feeling overwhelmed or stressed. I knew that the essay and the rejection weren't the sole cause, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my words had contributed more than I was willing to admit. I began to dread seeing him, knowing that every interaction would be a reminder of what I had done. And yet, I couldn't stop checking on him, couldn't stop making excuses to talk to him, to be near him, because a part of me still cared, even as the guilt consumed me. One night, after a particularly tense conversation, I found myself alone in my room, staring at the essay I had annotated months ago. The red ink seemed to mock me. I remembered writing that line about him being insincere, convinced that it was just a minor critique. But now, in hindsight, it felt like I had pulled a lever that set a series of unfortunate events into motion. I thought about confessing, about sending a message, about telling him everything, but I imagined his disappointment, his hurt, and I couldn't do it. The thought of shattering his trust was unbearable. So I locked the essay away, as if hiding it would somehow erase the past, even though I knew it wouldn't. Then, something unexpected happened. Jake started talking about applying to another internship, one less prestigious but still significant. He seemed nervous, hesitant, almost timid in his approach. My first instinct was to panic. I wanted to intervene, to make sure my previous mistake didn't haunt him again. I offered to look over his draft, and this time, I forced myself to be gentle, careful, almost painfully polite. I highlighted typos, suggested minor improvements, and left out any harsh commentary. And yet, even this cautious approach felt like a performance. I felt like a tightrope walker, balancing over a pit of fire, terrified that one misstep would ruin him again. Despite my careful editing, I realized that the damage from before couldn't simply be undone. My comments had left a mark on Jake, subtle but permanent, shaping how he viewed himself and his abilities. I could guide him, advise him, help him avoid mistakes, but I couldn't fix the self-doubt I had planted. And so, I started avoiding him more and more, finding excuses to limit our interactions, even though every fiber of my being wanted to help him succeed. It was a cruel paradox. I loved being near him, being his friend, yet every interaction reminded me of the harm I had caused. I began to see myself differently. I wasn't just the friend I had always thought I was. I was something else, a person capable of causing real, lasting damage, a person whose honesty had consequences I hadn't anticipated. I carried this realization silently, masking it with jokes, casual conversations, and empty smiles. And yet, deep down, I knew I couldn't escape the truth. I had become the villain in Jake's story, and no one else would ever know. Sometimes I imagine confessing, imagining the relief of finally telling him, of unburdening myself. But I also imagine his eyes narrowing in anger, the shock, the betrayal, the potential end of our friendship. And so, the secret stays buried, festering quietly inside me, a weight I carry alone. I watch him navigate life, unaware of the role I played in one of his deepest setbacks, and I wonder if he will ever realize the truth. The guilt is constant, a shadow that stretches across every conversation, every laugh, every moment we share. And I'm left to live with it, knowing that I might never find forgiveness, even from myself. Have you ever done something you regret so deeply that living with the secret feels heavier than anything else? Would you confess, even if it might destroy everything, or let the silence fester, knowing it's safer for everyone else? Things started to unravel in ways I never expected. It began with a small comment from Jake that I misinterpreted, though at the time it felt monumental. We were sitting in a coffee shop with a few mutual friends, and he mentioned that he felt like he wasn't good enough for certain opportunities. My stomach sank. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't just normal self-doubt. It was the shadow of my red-marked essay, the ghost of my words lingering in his mind. I wanted to say something comforting, something reassuring, but all I could manage was a tight-lipped smile and a vague, "You'll figure it out, you always do." Inside, I was screaming, wondering if I should finally tell him, but fear held me frozen. What if he hated me? What if he never spoke to me again? The thought alone was enough to make me retreat into silence. Over the next few weeks, the tension grew. I noticed little changes that previously might have seemed insignificant. Jake started hesitating before sharing ideas in group discussions. He second-guessed his own opinions, and his usual confidence was replaced with quiet caution. He seemed more introspective, almost fragile, as if my words had planted tiny cracks that spread into larger fissures over time. I couldn't help but blame myself entirely. Every time he stumbled socially or doubted himself, I felt a stab of guilt. I started avoiding eye contact during conversations, speaking less, and laughing at jokes a little too nervously, because every interaction reminded me of what I had done. The guilt became a constant companion, a weight that pressed on me relentlessly. One night, I had a dream that was so vivid it left me shaking when I woke up. In the dream, I was watching Jake walk across a stage, accepting an award for an internship or achievement that never came. As he reached the podium, he turned to me, eyes wide with hurt and disbelief. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. My voice failed me. The dream ended abruptly, leaving me with a cold sweat and a heart that refused to stop racing. Even waking life couldn't calm me. I spent days replaying that dream, wondering if it was some premonition or just the manifestation of my guilt eating me alive. Then came the social fallout. Mutual friends started noticing the distance between Jake and me. "You two seem off lately," one friend said casually during a group hangout. I laughed awkwardly and muttered something about being busy, but I could see the suspicion in their eyes. The guilt had become so visible that even others were beginning to sense it. It was humiliating and terrifying at the same time. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, to unburden myself, but the fear of judgment and the risk of exposing the truth about Jake's rejection kept me silent. So I carried it alone, a secret heavy enough to crush me slowly over time. Then one afternoon, Jake approached me with a draft of another application. My chest sank instantly. The fear and guilt collided into a physical weight I could barely manage. I opened the document, hands trembling. This time, I tried to approach it with utmost care, avoiding any critique that could be perceived as harsh. I focused on minor grammar issues, sentence structure, and clarity, consciously omitting any personal observations or subjective comments. I felt like I was tiptoeing across a minefield, terrified that one misstep could destroy him again. And yet, even as I did my best, I realized that nothing I did could erase the lingering effects of my previous interference. The doubt, the hesitation, the subtle erosion of confidence, they couldn't be undone with careful editing. As days turned into weeks, I started noticing small signs of recovery in Jake. He laughed a little more freely, spoke with a bit more certainty, and seemed to regain a fragment of the confidence I had so carelessly chipped away. Yet even this progress was bittersweet. Every smile, every small success, reminded me of the role I had played in his earlier failure. I felt like a spectator in his life, watching him heal from a wound I had inflicted, and yet unable to participate honestly. The burden of my guilt prevented me from fully engaging, from being the supportive friend I truly wanted to be. Then came the event that changed everything. A social gathering hosted by one of our mutual friends. It was casual, a mix of classmates, neighbors, and acquaintances, but the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Jake seemed more relaxed than I had seen him in months, joking with friends, sharing stories, laughing without hesitation. And yet, as I watched him, I felt an unexpected surge of dread. What if my secret slipped? What if someone mentioned the internship rejection, or my comments on the essay, or any detail that could reveal the truth? The thought of him discovering my role in his setback terrified me. My heart raced, palms sweaty, and I found myself fidgeting nervously, trying to stay invisible while remaining present. At one point, Jake came over to talk to me alone. My stomach dropped. He smiled, casual and easy, and I braced myself for some hidden accusation or unexpected revelation. But he didn't say anything about the internship, didn't even mention applications. Instead, he asked for advice on a different topic entirely, something trivial in comparison to the stakes of the previous situation. I realized then that he hadn't suspected my involvement, that he had somehow moved on, unaware of the shadow I had cast over him. Relief and guilt collided within me. Relief that he hadn't found out, guilt that I hadn't told him sooner, that I had let him struggle in silence while I carried the truth alone. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the duality of my emotions. I wanted to confess, to finally release the weight I had been carrying, but I feared the consequences too much. I feared losing him, losing our friendship, and perhaps even witnessing his anger and disappointment firsthand. Yet keeping the secret was slowly consuming me from the inside, gnawing at my conscience, and making it impossible to fully participate in life without the shadow of guilt looming over every interaction. I realized then that the truth wasn't something that could simply be revealed or hidden. It was a constant presence, a silent force shaping my thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And so I remained trapped between two realities. One where I am a friend, pretending that everything is normal, and another where I am the architect of his setback, carrying a burden too heavy to share. Every laugh, every conversation, every moment spent with him is tinged with the knowledge of my role in his suffering. The irony is cruel. I caused harm while thinking I was helping, sabotaged his confidence while believing I was being honest, and now, I watch as he moves forward unaware of the truth. I wonder daily if I will ever find a way to forgive myself, if I will ever have the courage to tell him, or if some secrets are meant to remain buried forever. And you, watching this, would you confess the truth knowing it could hurt someone you care about, or keep the secret to protect them, even if it slowly destroys you from within? It all came to a head on a rainy afternoon. I was at a cafe, pretending to work on a paper while stealing glances at Jake, who was sitting across the room with his laptop, completely absorbed in some project. He looked so focused, so determined, so alive in a way that made my chest ache with both pride and guilt. I wanted to tell him everything in that moment, to confess, to finally lift the burden that had been suffocating me for months, but as I opened my mouth, the words froze in my throat. Fear, shame, and the weight of potential consequences pinned me to my chair. What if he never forgave me? What if he saw me differently forever? What if I destroyed the trust we had left? The questions spun in my mind, faster and faster, until I felt like I was drowning in them. I watched as he typed, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. And then it happened. The slip, the moment that would haunt me forever. He leaned back, stretching, and muttered something under his breath, something about feeling like he wasn't enough, that maybe he wasn't cut out for this particular opportunity. My stomach twisted violently. I wanted to scream, to tell him that none of it was his fault, that he was more than capable, more than deserving. But the words that came out of my mouth were the exact opposite of what I wanted to say. I blurted, almost involuntarily, "Maybe you're right. Maybe you aren't ready." Immediately, I wished the ground would swallow me whole. I saw his shoulders slump slightly, the way he looked down at his laptop, the hesitation in his fingers as if my words had struck deeper than I could have imagined. The guilt was immediate, suffocating, a tidal wave crashing over me. I wanted to retract, to explain, to say that I was wrong, but I couldn't. The words had been spoken, irreversible, and I was powerless to take them back. After that day, something changed between us. He became quieter, more reserved, less willing to share his ideas or dreams. I tried to compensate, to make jokes, to be the supportive friend I pretended to be, but I knew the damage was done. My own behavior shifted as well. I became hyper-aware of every word, every expression, every action, afraid that another careless slip would ruin him further. Our interactions were no longer effortless or natural. There was a tension that hadn't existed before, subtle but pervasive, and I couldn't escape it. I felt trapped in a cycle of guilt and fear, watching him struggle while knowing I was a part of the cause. And then came the incident that made it real, undeniable. One evening, Jake sent me a message, unusually brief and formal. "Can we talk?" My heart sank instantly. My mind raced with possibilities. Had he discovered my role in his previous rejection? Was he confronting me for some reason? When we met, he was quiet, tense, and I felt the old familiar dread coil in my stomach. He didn't bring up the internship or my comments, but he did ask questions about my intentions, about my motivations, about why I had always been so meticulous and honest in ways that sometimes hurt more than they helped. I stumbled through answers, vague and evasive, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. He smiled faintly at the end, a mixture of suspicion and forgiveness, and I left the conversation trembling, unsure of what he truly knew. The weeks that followed were a strange limbo. Jake seemed to regain fragments of his confidence, yet I could see the subtle ways my words had reshaped his perception of himself. He was careful, measured, thoughtful, but there was a fragility beneath it all. Every success, every laugh, every shared memory was tinged with a silent reminder of my guilt. I became hyper-aware of my presence, of my influence, of the invisible chains I had placed around him with a few careless annotations and one ill-timed comment. I was trapped in a paradox. I wanted to help him, to support him, but every interaction reminded me of the damage I had already done. Then, the final irony struck. I realized that the secret I had been carrying, the truth of my role in his rejection, had become a defining part of my identity. I was the friend who was honest to a fault, the one whose words could sting, the one who had unknowingly altered the course of someone else's life. And yet, Jake had no idea. He laughed, shared stories, and moved forward as if nothing had happened, blissfully unaware that I had been the architect of one of his deepest disappointments. The knowledge of this kept me awake at night, gnawing at my conscience, reminding me that I had caused real harm, and that the truth was mine alone to bear. Sometimes I imagine telling him, confessing everything, letting the weight lift off my shoulders. But I also imagine the consequences. The anger, the disappointment, the betrayal in his eyes, and I shudder at the thought. I know that if I confess, there is no going back. The truth would reshape our friendship, possibly destroy it, possibly give him clarity. But at what cost? And so, I remain silent, carrying the burden, navigating the delicate balance of being present without causing further harm, trapped in a liminal space where I am both his friend and his secret adversary. Every day, I live with the tension between relief and guilt, between love and shame, between the desire to protect him and the need to unburden myself. The secret is a living thing inside me, shaping my thoughts, my actions, my very sense of self. I watch him, I interact, I laugh, I care, but always under the shadow of what I have done. I know that one slip, one word, one mistake could unravel everything, and yet I also know that life goes on, oblivious to the intricate web of guilt, mistakes, and secrets I carry alone. I have become a silent witness to the life I influenced in ways I never intended, and I don't know if I will ever forgive myself or find the courage to reveal the truth. So I ask you, watching this, have you ever made a mistake so heavy, so irreversible, that keeping it secret feels like the only option? Would you confess, even if it might destroy everything you care about, or would you carry it silently, living with the weight forever?